Increasing federal support for minority-owned small businesses, as well as small businesses in underserved communities, has been my top priority since I joined this committee and entering the Senate in January of 2007, and it has remained my priority as ranking member. My home state of Maryland boasts the highest concentration of minority-owned and women-owned businesses in the country, so this issue is particularly important to Marylanders. Decades ago, Maryland leaders recognized the key role entrepreneurship had in efforts to close the wealth gap. In fact, the first federal set-aside for minority-owned businesses was proposed in 1977 by the late Baltimore Congressman Parent J. Mitchell, who introduced an amendment to the $4 billion federal public works program that required city and state recipients to set aside 10% of the funds for minority-owned businesses. Congressman Mitchell understood that any plan to shrink the wealth gap in America must include entrepreneurship, and that the federal government has an important role to play in helping minority entrepreneurs overcome the historic, pervasive challenges put before them. The most pervasive of those challenges is access to capital. Mr. Chairman, while our hearing is focused on ensuring an equitable recovery, I feel the need to place today's discussion in historical context. During a field hearing I held on this topic in September of 2018 at Morgan State University and HBCU in Baltimore, an executive of Harbor Bank, which is one of the few remaining Black-owned banks in the country, stressed that lenders working with minorities need to understand borrowers, not only where they are going, but where they have been. It is vital that we in Congress approach this problem with the same understanding. Minority entrepreneurs' inability to get capital they need to operate and grow their businesses is not new. And in fact, the minority-owned small businesses have been disproportionately harmed by the COVID-19 recession should not be a surprise. Prior to this pandemic, lending to minority-owned small businesses still had not returned to their pre-Great Recession levels. The protests sparked by the deaths of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor have further exposed the public health and economic disparities in communities of color, particularly Black communities, that have been made worse by COVID-19 pandemic. There's a common saying that I've heard many times by Black leaders in Maryland. When America has a cold, Black communities have pneumonia. These disparities exist because civil rights and true equity are still the unfinished business of America. More than 50 years ago, the nonpartisan Cardin Commission, created by President Lyndon Johnson, warned of the negative consequences of continued inequality. The Commission wrote in its report that America was headed towards two societies, one Black, one white, separate and unequal. It is no question that our country has made progress in the decades since the Cardin Commission released its report, but there remains a rooted economic divide between communities of color and white America. In 1968, a typical middle-class Black family had less than 1/10 of the wealth of a typical middle-class white family. It is the same today. For Black small business owners and minority entrepreneurs, the wealth gap is worsened the disparity in lending. Minority business owners are 2 to 3 times more likely to be denied a loan than non-minority business owners, and are more likely to receive less funding and pay higher interest rates on the loans they do receive. Mr. Chairman, it was with this inequality in mind that Senator Shaheen and I drafted the CARES Act, instructing SBA and the Treasury Department to issue guidance to financial institutions participating in the Paycheck Protection Program to prioritize loans for underserved small businesses. Unfortunately, the administration did not issue that guidance, which led to the SBA's IG's finding that the implementation of PPP did not fully align with congressional intent in the CARES Act. Implementation of PPP was not the only program in which the administration failed to use every tool in its toolbox to prevent minority-owned businesses from falling behind during this crisis. The administration also failed to implement the EIDL and emergency grant program in a way that would benefit more minority-owned businesses. So, Mr. Chairman, as we discuss how to ensure equitable recovery for small businesses today, we must think about the problem historically. We must invest in the programs that we know work. The Minority Business Development Agency, which is the only federal agency dedicated to supporting minority-owned businesses. The 7A Community Advantage Pilot Program, which has a long record of successfully getting capital to minority-owned businesses. I've introduced legislation to make both of these vital initiatives permanent and codified, because right now they are not. We cannot stop there. I was proud to work with Senator Booker to release a plan outlining steps Congress can take to provide greater help for small businesses in underserved communities with regard to startup and operating capital, as well as technical training and mentorship. The aim of our plan is to ensure that when we make it through this pandemic and we have the next economic downturn, we will have the institutions, programs, and knowledge in place to support underserved small businesses in a timely way. Mr. Chairman, I want to thank you again for calling this overdue hearing, especially as we in Congress continue to negotiate and debate the next round of economic stimulus. Last time, we got the funds out the door quickly and helped a lot of people, but far too many minority-owned businesses were left behind. The truth is that even with the CARES Act, there is an inequality in how resources were allocated, including inequality in some of the basic underpinnings of the PPP. The primary use of traditional financial institutions to disperse capital meant minority-owned businesses would have a harder time obtaining these important loans. And the focus on payroll made the program less useful to many minority-owned businesses, which are not only have fewer employees on average, but are less likely to have any employees at all. The next stimulus gives us an opportunity to improve the success of the CARES Act and to do a better job in providing help to minority-owned small businesses. Let us take advantage of this opportunity to avoid the consequences predicted by the Cardin Commission 50 years ago, so America is not two societies, separate and unequal. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll look forward to hearing from our witnesses.